So the talk is all about a special session to maybe stave off a ballot issue on fracking. To talk about that from the Denver Business Journal, Cathy Proctor, thank you for being here. And from the Springs Gazette, Megan Schrader, thank you for being here. Let's get to this. Jared Polis has been the money behind these threatened ballot issues that has the oil and gas industry all in a tither, because if it did, it would change the laws by which they are able to do their business and would drive their business out of state, or so they claim. And so everything's moving along pretty well until there's talk of a special session. What is this talk? What is the skinny first, and what's that issue?
So the governor in the Colorado Constitution can call for a special session, call all the lawmakers back, have them address a very specific set of issues that the governor sets forth. In this case, it would be local control of hydraulic fracturing, and actually local control of all oil and gas operations. He feels like if he can get enough people at the table to come to an agreement, a compromise, he can stave off the ballot initiatives which threaten to put something in the Colorado Constitution, lock it in stone, that could create setbacks for oil and gas companies, a hodgepodge of regulations across the state that they really feel like they can't operate under.
All right, but what was interesting is this bargaining, a little Khrushchev Kennedy bargaining going on that said, Jared Polis said, all right, if you do this, I'll pull my funding. What was this that he said, I'll pull my funding?
Well, and this is true. About a week ago, there was a proposal that was floated that would be the compromise. That if everybody could come together, that if Hickenlooper could get it through the legislature, that according to the Hickenlooper administration, Jared Polis had agreed that he would pull funding for these ballot initiatives. He has 9 currently that are
nine
that
this
are under consideration.
This is what's great about being the richest Democrat in Congress. You can afford to put up 9 initiatives.
Well, at this point, they're simply proposals. It doesn't take a lot of money simply to write out a bunch of proposals. Where the money is going to be required is for anybody who wants to actually go out and gather signatures. That's what we're looking at over the summer. Once we know, what proposals is Congressman Polis going to be focusing on. But you're right, he has said that he will pull those proposals, he will pull his funding for that effort if this legislative proposal is passed by the House and by the Senate, and it is in the form that it currently exists. There can be no amendments, is what we've been told.
That's pretty gutsy. You got to like this. A congressman says, Governor, legislature, I won't mess with your ballot if you do this exactly. Now, you're telling 100 legislators and a governor to pass a bill exactly like it is. You've covered the Capitol enough. What a brazen thing to say. I will pull my funding if you pass it just the way it is.
So there's an ego or two at the Capitol, and that might not go over so well with some, say, Republicans and even some Democrats who, for them, this is a issue that is near and dear to their hearts, near and dear to their voters. They might feel passionately one way or the other, and they might like to see some tweaks and changes on a bill like this. I think it would have to go through some changes to get passed, and then they'd have to take it back to the congressman and see if he was still willing to pull his funding.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a federal congressman dictating terms to a Colorado state government. And if so, he will turn off the funding to yet another organization that might bring this ballot proposal forward. But they could still do it without his funding, couldn't they, if they found some other rich guy who wanted to fund it?
I'm sure anything is possible. It does take money to put signature gatherers out on the street. Where that money comes from is, you might be willing to put up some money, perhaps for your own set of ballot initiatives too. This is Colorado.
I've never done such a thing.
This is Colorado, and historically we have a very relatively, comparatively low bar for what it takes to get onto the ballot. And a lot of folks are saying that this is part of the problem, that because it is so easy to get on the ballot, these kind of things happen. And I gotta say,
by the way, as a guy who's put several things on the ballot, if you have money, you can get things on the ballot. For guys like me who have to really work, it is a bitch getting something on the ballot. So it's an easy thing to say, it's easy to do. He's getting later and later in the season to get these signatures, which means the cost goes skyrocketing, which isn't a problem if you're Jared Polis.
So there is actually a group out there right now. People seem to forget the Community Rights Network. They have already gotten their language approved. They're out gathering signatures for their petition right now. I don't think they have Jared Polis funding, but I do think that they're very motivated and active across the state with volunteers. They might be the dark horse to, foil all of these plans if they land on the ballot with their initiative. And their initiative is interesting. It gives local communities the right to regulate industries, businesses that affect, I think it's the health and environment of a community.
Well, that could be anything. That is a
danger.
That is
very wide.
That is something that could be perverted in all sorts of different ways. Forget just the fracking issue. Let's talk Hickenlooper for a second. So Hickenlooper could look like this great broker if he could do it. Now, he is a geologist. He knows that hydraulic fracturing is safe. He's been involved in the industry. He gets that. But there's been some complaints there as well that he hasn't brought all the stakeholders. Because in Colorado, you got to bring all the stakeholders in. You got to bring not just the oil and gas, but the farming community and the other associations that might have something to do with this. He hasn't done that. So is there really a lot of support for this compromise?
There seems to be a lot of support against this compromise. The farming groups have come out to say that they don't like what's on the table right now. Both of the oil and gas associations, interestingly enough, the Colorado Oil and Gas Association as well as the Colorado Petroleum Association, both of those groups have said they don't like it. The home builders have said they don't like it. So, who's left? Anadarko Petroleum, Noble Energy, two of the biggest operators here in Colorado that are drilling. Both of those companies are spending billions of dollars up north in Weld County, and they plan to continue spending billions of dollars, or they want to continue to spend billions of dollars. Those two companies are pushing for this compromise very, very hard. Their leadership says that this is the right compromise, it's the right thing to do. They don't want to run the risk of these ballot initiatives that that Congressman Polis, that the community rights groups, they don't want to run the risk that these will get passed, be put into the Constitution, and cause far more problems down the road.
They're running serious. So Hick has all the static coming from a lot of his constituents, and now Jared Polis, I hear, is getting static from people who are even farther left than Jared Polis, which is kind of odd because it was his money to begin with. And now a lot of the fractivists seem to be upset with Jared. True?
Well, I haven't heard that. I know that a lot of fractivists, as you call them, are not happy
Frack
with
jobs is what I call them.
are not happy with the compromise. They don't think it's strong enough. The Community Rights Network, for example, has said even if they had been invited to the table, they're not willing to compromise. So yes, I think that I think even if there is a ballot initiative, we'll still see people trying to get this on the ballot.
Are Republicans in the legislature pretty held together on this? I mean, if Anadarko and Noble come in and say, hey, boys, we want you to support this, will they? Or will they say, wait a second, this is going to be a victory for Hickenlooper, and we're not going to do that in an election year, so we're going to oppose it? What's your read on that?
Well, I honestly don't cover the legislature that closely. I have heard that the Republican contingent is holding fairly tight in opposition to this. Megan, what have you heard?
I think so. I think that you're right. Even if there is outside pressure from the oil companies to come up with a compromise, the thought of giving Hickenlooper such a victory leading into the November elections might be tough for them to swallow. Because it would look great for Hickenlooper if he could pull off this negotiation, this compromise.
It's an incredibly tough topic.
It is. And he did it once already for the air quality regulations with the same companies, Anadarko and Noble. If he could do it again, it would be impressive.
And that's actually an interesting point. Hickenlooper and Anadarko, Noble, and a third company in Canada got together with the Environmental Defense Fund earlier this year and put together the first in the nation rules on air quality to capture methane, and it has been touted across the nation. And there's a lot of hangover from that among the oil and gas companies.
What do you mean hangover?
Hangover. There were people who were not invited to the table, something that we have heard repeatedly over the last week, over the last several weeks. They weren't invited to the table, and it's folks here in Colorado. Frankly, it's the industry at large outside of Colorado who are saying, wait a minute, you did this with the methane rules. You cut a deal And Colorado is looked to across the country as we're the people who seem to be doing it right, that we can have the environment, we can have the oil and gas, we can have the jobs, we can have the economy, we can have it all. So they're looking to the state for guidance, and companies outside of Colorado are like, you had the methane rules, stop now.
Were they unhappy about those rules? The outside, because I mean, you're right. There are players inside the state, but there are also players outside. There's Halliburton and Exxon and all the. I mean, the huge companies. Where they were not happy about the rules.
I don't think so.
They were not invited to the table, and they were very, very upset about that. They wanted to be involved. They also had problems with the rules themselves, and so here we are, months later. Not even 6 months later, we're back in the same position with yet another very hot button topic that Colorado is on the forefront of. And people both in the oil and gas industry inside of Colorado and outside of Colorado are saying, we need to take a breath. This is not the deal on the table that we want. We cannot support it. And there's a real split in the industry.
It's hard to get all 100 legislators to say, all right, here are our positions, we're not going to move. The Senate is in control of the Democrats by 1. Yeah, I think about folks like Lois Tochtrop, who's a very independent-minded Democrat, and she's term limited, and she wasn't treated very well by leadership in the last couple of years, and I don't think she's anti-oil and gas. This is somebody who could swing things completely. That's a lot to ride on a legislature that's hard to control.
Yeah, it is, and it would be a big risk for Hickenlooper as well to call a special session and have the bill fail. I think it would cost, I've heard estimates around $30,000 to $36,000 to pull the lawmakers together for 3 days, possibly longer depending on how long it takes. That's a lot to ride on one vote in the Senate.
Oh, that's nothing. We've got a $20 billion budget. That's chump change. It is the image. It's the perception of this.
Yeah.
And Hick can't go forward with this if it fails. So let's get to the bottom line. 1, does this special session on fracking happen? If so, does something pass? If something passes, does Jared honor his promise? Where do you think it goes? What's your crystal ball?
My crystal ball is extremely cloudy on this. I'm sorry about that, but this is a situation that is changing almost day by day. And Hickenlooper has pulled deals together before that nobody saw coming. He might pull this one out. It might fail. But you're right, time is growing very, very short. These signatures have to be gathered if we're going to have something on the ballot. So every single day that goes by is another day that
prices go up. And all right, bring it over here. What do you think?
I think it would be unlikely for a special session to occur.
Really? You don't think it's going to get called at all?
I think it's a lot to ask for to have agreement on something this controversial. They couldn't do it during the session despite efforts throughout. I would be very surprised if a special session
So
occurred.
the battle goes to the ballot box as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
Megan, thank you. Kathy, thank you. And thank you. Hey, listen to me on KHOW Radio on Sunday afternoons. Check out the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Tell a friend. We'll see you next week.